Okay, welcome back to reviewing APA and looking at the chapters that are most pertinent to you as a graduate student in the program. So, looking here, we have looked at Chapter 2 and how you're going to structure your paper. In this episode, we're going to look at Chapter 3. So let's highlight Chapter 3, Writing Clearly and Concisely. This chapter concentrates on organization and some basic principles for writing with clarity and precision and for avoiding bias in language. It concludes by demonstrating how correct grammar is the foundation of clear, effective, and persuasive communication. So we're going to start off with a little bit about organization, dealing with headings. But then we're going to get in and concentrate more on that clear and concise writing. And this is probably one of the biggest areas that I see graduate students struggle when they first get into graduate school. And again, I was that person who struggled when I first got into graduate school. So we're going to spend more time dealing with that writing clearly and concisely piece. But let's talk about organization a little bit. So first of all, you are going to use headings in your paper. And so real quickly here, looking heading structure for all sections follow the same top-down progression. Do not label headings with numbers or letters. The numbers of levels of heading needed will depend on its length and complexity. If only one level is needed, then use level 1. If 2 levels are needed, then use levels 1 and 2. And I'm going to show you the exact page out of the APA manual what we're talking about when we say levels 1 and 2. Keep in mind, we said this in the brief part on chapter 2, the introduction to a manuscript does not carry a heading that labels it as introduction. The introduction to a manuscript, the first page of your manuscript, simply has the title, and then you double space and start your manuscript. So here is what I was talking about when I said we would look at the levels of headings. So you are going to have at least 2 headings in your paper. The main heading will be center, boldface, upper, lower. Your paragraph begins below indented like a regular paragraph. The second heading is when you're going to break up the paper into various parts. Okay, so I can see, now you can organize it as you wish, but I can see, for example, you using the level 1 heading as the title of your page, as we said already, and then level 2 talking about the prose. You might list the prose using a level 2 heading, prose of such and such. And then when you get into the cons, use a level 2 heading to distinguish the cons of such and such. It just makes it a lot easier for the reader to work through your paper and to see where you are in your paper. Okay, if you do go to a level 3, then you can see there it's indented, boldface, lowercase paragraph heading ending with a period, and then your paragraph begins right after the heading. So it's a little bit different for a level 3 heading. And you can see I don't see anybody using 4 and 5 level headings. So at most you're going to probably use level 1, 2, and 3, but more likely you're just going to use levels 1 and 2. So now that we've talked a little bit about organization, and again, the purpose of your headings is to make it easier for the reader to work through your paper and to understand the distinct parts within your paper. And one of the videos that I've placed on in the module from YouTube will talk about how you can do this and use your headings to navigate the paper as you're reading in a Word document. That's not necessary, that piece, but I do expect you to use proper headings. So now let's talk about writing concisely and writing clearly. So the first thing here, and if you notice in the top left-hand corner of this slide, On some of these, I'm going to refer to the exact section in the APA manual, so you can look if you have questions. This particular one is in section 3.04. Here we're talking about seriation, or making a list. And there are two ways to make lists, whether you're going to have it if you're using paragraphs or if you're going to use it within a sentence. Okay. And the first example here shows you how to do it in a paragraph form. If you're using paragraphs, you use Arabic numerals followed by a period. One can use bullets. So you see here the researchers showed participants would make the following judgments of control, colon, and then we're going to go down to a new paragraph. We're going to start 1, period, double space, 2, period, double space. Okay, that's a paragraph format for seriation. If you're going to put it in a sentence, then instead of using numbers, Arabic numerals, we use lowercase letters. And you see here on the second example how that's done. The participants' 3 choices were parentheses A, close parentheses, working with another participant, comma, working with the team, comma, and working alone. So you see how both of those are done depending on your preference. Moving to the next, this becomes a little bit burdensome reading. And so what we're talking about here are economy of expression, or economies of expressions. Avoid redundancies, wordiness, useless jargon, evasiveness, colloquialisms, and passive voice. And we're going to talk about passive voice in its own right here later on. What I tell people is when you start writing your paper, I don't want the first page to tell me how important education is and that children are our future. Okay? That's getting into wordiness and useless jargon. Okay? Forget all that. Get straight to the point when you're writing professional writing, and that's what you're doing. Okay? Short words and short sentences are easier to comprehend than are long ones. And even so, even with that, here's a caveat. Don't make choppy sentences that actually become cumbersome to read and no flow develops. Okay, so when I say short sentences, I don't mean a list of short sentences that just doesn't flow. If your sentence starts to run multiple lines, then you need to cut it up a little bit. Okay. When we talk about redundancies, and this is just a fine thing that you're going to pick up on as you do more writing. Here are some examples of redundancies. Okay. They were both alike. A total of 68 participants. 4 different groups saw. So in other words, what we're saying here is instead of saying a total of 68 participants, just say 68 participants. They were both alike. Just say the students were alike. Okay. If we know we're talking about 2 students, then we don't want to say they were both alike. Just say they were alike. That's economy of expression. And it really is redundant to repeat a total of, and the 68 participants. There were 68 participants. We know that 68 means a total, and so that's why it's redundant. 4 different groups. 4 groups saw. When we say different groups, obviously when we say 4 groups, we're not talking about 4 of the same group. That wouldn't make sense. So 4 groups saw. That's, again, what we mean by economy of expression. You can see the rest of these on here. Instructions, which were exactly the same as those used. Exactly and the same are redundant expressions. Absolutely essential. If something is essential, then it is absolutely essential. We don't need to say that. Small in size. Small is a description of size, so we don't need to repeat small in size. A period of time. Time is a period of time. We don't need to say a period of time. Period and time are synonymous. And the reason is because the reason is the reason. In other words, because and the reason are both doing the same, have the same purpose in that sentence. So avoid these kinds of redundancies. And I will go through your papers and help point some of these out if they happen to sneak in. A little bit more about economy of expression, and here we want to talk about a couple of slides dealing with paragraphs. Single sentence paragraphs are abrupt, and you're not going to do that. Okay, I'm going to tell you what the minimum length is on the next slide. Paragraphs that are too long are likely to lose the reader's attention. A new paragraph provides a pause for the reader. And what do we mean by too long? Well, you can generally get the idea, but this last bullet, if a paragraph runs longer than one double-type spaced or double-spaced manuscript page, then it's way, way too long. Okay, find a place to break it up and do a new paragraph. So what do we mean by paragraphs? So a paragraph at its minimum must consist of a topic sentence. What am I going to talk about in the paragraph? This is the sandwich method, the 5-paragraph theme idea, those kinds of things, all rolled into 3 sentences here. Okay, your topic sentence, what are you going to talk about? At least one supportive sentence. What details or examples can I add that make my topic sentence stronger? And then finally, a concluding sentence. How do I wrap up what I have just said and lead the reader into the next paragraph? Transition the reader into the next paragraph. So in other words, for this class and any graduate class you're going to be taking would be my recommendation, but definitely for my classes, you have to have a minimum of 3 sentences in your paragraphs. Okay? So that's enough about paragraphs. Let's talk about pronouns. So pronouns, obviously we know the function of a pronoun. A pronoun takes the place of a noun, so we don't keep repeating the noun. The use of pronouns can be confusing, though, if the reader doesn't know what the antecedent is. So the antecedent then is the noun to which the pronoun refers. So my recommendation, so that it is not confusing for the reader, is that you always, whenever you are doing a new paragraph and you've been using pronoun, you may be talking about student Carlos, and you may talk about Carlos in the beginning and then you keep referring to him as he. When you go to this next paragraph, repeat your antecedent. Okay, that's what I mean when I say restate your antecedent when you change paragraph. That way, you never want to see a pronoun in your topic sentence. Okay, it's going to help your reader follow what you're saying, and that's what the next bullet says. You should not have a topic sentence that contains a pronoun if there is no antecedent in the paragraph. And we will talk more about pronouns later. But that's the big thing with pronouns, and this is a common issue that I see with students in their writing, is confusion over pronouns. Anthropomorphism. This is another one that's somewhat of an issue, and I'm going to give you some concrete examples here of writing for education where we see anthropomorphism. Anthropomorphism means giving human qualities to inanimate objects. Okay, so here are some examples. The community program was persuaded to allow 5 of the observers to become tutors. Here we're saying that the program was persuaded. It wasn't the program that was persuaded. The program is an inanimate object and cannot be persuaded. It's the leaders of the community program who were persuaded. One of the common mistakes is the next one. Actually, the 2 probably most common mistakes are the next 2. The district sent 5 teachers to the conference. We can understand exactly what that means, but in technical writing, that's inappropriate. The district is an inanimate object that does not do anything. District leaders sent 5 teachers, or more clearly, keep in mind that's what we're talking about is clear writing. The superintendent sent 5 teachers to the conference. See how much better that sounds. This next one is another very common mistake, When you're referring to an article, you don't say the article stated blank. The article, again, does not talk. It does not have an opinion about anything. It is the authors who stated. And more precisely, it's probably an author with a name, such as Smith, parentheses, 2010, close parentheses, stated, blah, blah, blah. Okay, we're going to talk about referencing in-text references later. But that's how you should restate that. Okay, and I will point these out to you as I'm going through your drafts. A little bit more about anthropomorphism. So here's a better way to write those things. I just gave you that. The staff of the community program was persuaded, the principal sent 5 teachers, and the author stated. Okay, so I'll point those out to you. And again, the reason, just for the sake of full disclosure here, obviously the reason that I'm going to be a stickler on this stuff is because I was in your shoes when I went through graduate school, and I was the recipient of this, of all the blood-stained papers. It was actually pencil, but if it had been red ink, it would have looked like blood, correcting all my grammar. Okay, and even today, it is by far not perfect, but it's a little bit better than it was when I was in graduate school. So I lived, I'm here alive today, so you will live through this process as well. So let's mention sensitive writing, just a couple of slides here about this. Become gender neutral in your writing. Some of you are dealing with transgender issues in your writing, which is a hot topic today. So both of these rules may apply to you, so just be aware of it. Become gender neutral as much as possible. You're going to be able to do that. And if you don't, I'll point it out to you. And then sexual orientation is the preferred term. Lesbian, gay men, bisexual men, and bisexual women are preferable to homosexual when referring to specific groups. Okay, so just be aware of that. And just a couple of more things. Disabilities, and this is one that even many people in education don't get, but I want you to be sensitive to this. Again, this is called sensitive writing. Avoid language that equates persons with their conditions, that has superfluous negative overtones, or that is regarded as a slur. For example, use person with paraplegia, a youth with autism, and people with intellectual disabilities. Don't use words like paraplegic, autistic, or retarded student. We're not going to use the word retarded student. But even in that, I would not refer to students as special ed students. In writing, I would refer to them as students who receive special education services. Okay, and I've done that and made that change on a lot of technical reports that I write, especially regarding students who receive special education services. Racial biases. Racial and ethnic groups are designated by proper nouns and therefore are capitalized. If using minority, make sure that you use ethnic or racial minority. Okay, but keep in mind that when you are talking about racial and ethnic groups, they are designated as proper nouns. So black, white, Native American, Asian American, American Indian, however you're going to say it, if it's a racial or ethnic group, it is a proper noun. Agreement with subject and verb. Now this you would think is a common thing. We wouldn't have to deal with it so much, but there are some issues here. Okay, and so I want you to look at some examples here. The percentage of correct responses, as well as the speed of the responses, increases with practice. So in other words, our subject of this sentence is percentage of correct responses, as well as the speed of the responses, are prepositional phrases. Your subject does not appear in a prepositional phrase. So when you take those out, your subject is the percentage. It is third person singular, so therefore we have to say the percentage increases with practice. Okay, so it is not the percentage of correct responses as well as the speed of the responses increase with practice. I think the reason that sounds correct is because the word responses being a plural subject, if that were the subject, precedes our verb immediately. But actually, as we just pointed out, the correct subject of this sentence is the percentage. The number of freshmen is growing. A number of freshmen are enrolled in physics. The distinction here is your article. Okay, when you say the number, you're talking about a specific number, and therefore it is considered to be singular. When you say a number, again, we're going to take out of freshmen because that's a prepositional phrase. A number is not considered to be singular, it is considered to be plural, and therefore we're talking about a group at this point, and so that's why it is plural. A number are enrolled in physics. Okay? So the word none is a little bit different, and you can see here that I have two examples. None of the information was correct. None of the children were finished in the time allotted. And so the word none, if that becomes your subject, is going to be different. And to be honest, I've looked at different reasonings behind the use of none as your subject and whether it's singular or plural. And in this instance, I'm going to tell you to look in that prepositional phrase. And if I'm incorrect on that, then I apologize. But both of these are acceptable. And that's the only thing that I see that makes it acceptable is by looking at that prepositional phrase. And the word neither the administrator nor the participants were in the room. Our subjects are administrator and participants, so therefore it is plural. So work on that. A little bit of issue with this, not much, but a little bit of issue with subject-verb agreement. Excuse me. This is a much larger issue. Okay. Along with pronouns, this is probably the number one issue that I see with writers at the graduate level, and that is using active versus passive voice. Okay, and here you have to use action verbs. I'm going to give you some examples of active versus passive sentences. What I will do is probably circle something on your paper and say passive, passive, passive. Okay. So active voice indicates the subject is doing the action. Passive voice indicates the object is acting on the subject or what we want to be the subject in the sentence. And so here are some examples. The survey was conducted in a controlled setting. The student was told to sit down by the teacher, and the team was ordered to get on the bus. So those make clear sense of what they were. Notice what makes them passive is the use of the verb to be. Here it's the past tense was, third person singular. And so when we do that, what happens is our sentence becomes passive. We don't want that. We want an active voice in our sentence. And notice the first bullet here said to use action verbs. So let's rewrite each of these sentences. Instead of saying the survey was conducted in a controlled setting, the principal investigator conducted the survey in a controlled setting. Much more robust, in my opinion, to read when we put it in active voice. The student was told to sit down by the teacher. The teacher told the student to sit down. Or even better, Mr. Jones told Billy to sit down in his seat. Okay, sit down in his seat's probably redundant. We probably would mark that up. Told Billy to sit down or sit in his seat. The team was ordered to get on the bus. Rewriting this, the coach ordered the team to get on the bus. Okay, so you can see it's easy to change passive voice to active voice. And again, it's much easier to read and it's much easier to follow, and it's going to keep the attention of your reader for a much longer period of time. So we talked a little bit about pronouns. I told you we were going to come back to pronouns. Okay, pronouns must agree in number with their antecedents. So earlier we said that when we were talking about pronouns, we said that the pronouns have to have an antecedent, and you never want to start a new paragraph with a pronoun in the topic sentence unless you put the antecedent there with it. You always want to restate your noun and then use the pronoun every time you change a paragraph. But keep in mind, pronouns must agree in number with their antecedents. And this is another very common error that I see. When a teacher wants to get the attention of the class, they should flip the lights on and off. Okay? Probably one of the most common mistakes here. It makes sense, we understand, but actually, if you look at this, the subject of this sentence is teacher. Teacher is a singular third-person subject. Our pronoun is they. They is a third-person plural pronoun. We have to have a pronoun that matches in number, and so here we need to rewrite our sentence and say, when a teacher wants to get the attention of the class, he or she should flip the lights on and off. Okay. If we want to keep they, then we need to change our subject to read, when teachers want to get the attention of the class, they should flip the lights on and off. Another example, neither the highest score nor the lowest score in the group had any doubt about their competence. Here we go back a little bit to that use of none and neither, but here we're looking at a couple of things that are wrong with this sentence. The first thing is that we are referring to the score, and the score is an inanimate object, and so we really don't want to do that. So to make it more clear for the reader, we would say neither the highest scorer nor the lowest scorer in the group had any doubt about his or her competence. Okay, notice that if we don't change it to score, we anthropomorphize the word score, and score is not something that we need here. We need a human being, and so therefore we need to change it to score. And we would want to change our pronoun to his or her competence. Couple more things about pronouns. The use of who versus that. This is another common error. Okay, we use who, and it's very simple to fix this. We use who when we're talking about human beings. We use that or which for animals and for things. Okay, for example, the teachers who participated were pleased with their training. Not the teachers that participated were pleased with their training. It may make sense to you, it may sound normal, but it's grammatically incorrect. So we need to say the teachers who. We're using who because teachers are human beings. And we will leave that alone. The rats that were chasing their tails were classified as neurotics. The rats who were chasing their tails were classified as neurotics. The reason that we use the rats that is because rats are not human beings. And again, we'll leave that alone, especially after a sentence with teachers. But you get the basic idea. Who, when referring to human beings, that, a pronoun when referring to animals. That or which. So now let's take the question, what do we use? That or which? Use that when the clause is essential to the meaning of the sentence. Okay? For example, the animals that performed well in the first experiment were used in the second experiment. And here you can see that the way this sentence is written, it is essential that we use the word that because we're specifying which animals were used in the second experiment. Here we're going to use which, and this is a clause that merely adds information. So however you want to structure your sentence, you can see the different uses here. The animals, comma, which performed well in the first experiment, comma, were not proficient in the second experiment. So here you can see where in the first sentence we've made it essential. In the second sentence, it just adds further information. I would argue this is probably an essential thing. It means get rid of the which. But this is just an example of the difference in using that versus which. Okay? If you're going to use the word that, you probably will not have a comma. And if you're going to use the word which, you will separate that clause with a comma because it is merely adding information. So keep that as a simple rule. Parallel structure. Every now and then I see issues with parallel structure. So do not. In other words, here's some examples for you. In the years between the games, competitors were taught wrestling, javelin throwing, and how to box. You may understand this, it may make perfect sense, but this is not parallel structure, okay? And the reason this is not parallel structure, if it's not clear here, it will be clear after looking at this sentence, okay? In the years between the games, competitors were taught wrestling, javelin throwing, and boxing. So notice our parallel structure there is when we're talking about what they were taught. They were taught wrestling, throwing, and boxing. All three of those are written in a gerund form. And so that's the parallel structure. In the first sentence, only the first two are written in gerund form, and the third is written as an infinitive. And so that is not parallel. Okay, let me give you another example. 3 reasons why steel companies kept losing money were that their plants were inefficient, high labor costs, and foreign competition was increasing. It makes sense, but here's a better way to put it more clearly. 3 reasons steel companies kept losing money were inefficient plants, high labor costs, and increased foreign competition. Notice that what we've done in this correct way is we've taken out those helping verbs that were in the first and the third example in the do not sentence, and we've just replaced them with noun clauses. Okay. Now it's all parallel. In the first one we had verb clause, noun clause, verb clause. Now we just have noun clauses. We could have gone the other way. But however you do it, make sure that it's parallel. So now you understand parallel structure. And our last slide, working on professional writing, is simple. Okay. Avoid using contractions. When you are writing, avoid the use of contractions. So don't say don't. Use do not. Okay. Well, it's not really contraction. Cannot and cannot, C-A-N space N-O-T and C-A-N-N-O-T, either one of those is acceptable. Avoid can't. Okay. And then the second one is avoid ending sentences in prepositions. It just leads the reader to a cliff and lets them fall off. As that sentence does, it lets them fall off what? It leads the reader to a cliff and lets them fall off into the abyss because there is no end to the sentence. Okay? So avoid ending your sentences in prepositions. Those are just 2 extra things that I will nitpick on as I'm reading through your drafts. So that ends the clear and concise writing portion. In the next video, we'll look a little bit at punctuation and the use of capitalization, abbreviations, and so forth. Another area where people, when they start working in professional writing, have a few hiccups in the beginning.